Hello, this is My Sweet Mess, and welcome to my kitchen, where every week I make a mess trying new recipes in the pursuit of something sweet. This week, I am excited to try a new-to-me recipe for sour cream coffee cake. This recipe is from Christy over at Love from the Oven, and I'll leave the original recipe link in the show notes below. I am a breakfast person. I have to eat breakfast every day, and honestly, the bigger the better. So I am very excited to try this recipe to kick off my day with a special treat. Anyway, enough chit chat, let's get started with our mise en place. This is a French term which translates to putting in place or everything in its place. It's the practice of preparing your ingredients and your tools before you get started cooking. Essentially what I do is I take a look at my ingredient list and all of the recipe steps before I get started. I then measure everything out and put the ingredients in their own bowls as opposed to measuring and dumping as I go. Now I am left with a few more dishes at the end of the bake, but it helps set me up for success. I am by no means an expert in the practice and certainly could be better about preparing my equipment and tools especially, but overall I like the practice and am excited to continue getting better at it. If you've never tried the mise en place technique, I highly encourage you give it a try. I did want to call out for this recipe, there is a cinnamon streusel recipe and the coffee cake recipe that needs to be prepared, and there are duplicate ingredients across both. For example, both the cinnamon streusel and the coffee cake need flour and sugar and cinnamon and so on. What I did for the mise en place is to keep the streusel ingredients on one side of my counter and then the cake ingredients on the other side of my counter, so when it came time to start mixing things together, I knew which side of the counter to pull from. Now that all of my ingredients are measured out and ready to be used, let's prepare our equipment. In looking at the recipe, I will need a few bowls to mix our ingredients in, one for the streusel and then one for the cake batter, as well as a prepared 9x9 inch pan. You can either butter the 9x9 inch pan, or I chose to line it with parchment paper, which will hopefully make it easier to take the coffee cake out of the pan later. I saw a technique where you can pinch the parchment paper against the corners of your baking pan and then fold to connect the pinches and then cut, which should make the parchment paper fit perfectly. This is the first time I am trying this very helpful technique, and I did not nail it. I think I moved the pan when I was measuring, so I'm gonna try again. If I'm honest, I didn't nail the second attempt either. I am trusting that the weight of the batter will help push the parchment paper down, because at this point I've kind of spun my wheels on this and I need to just move on. So with that, good enough is going to be good enough, and I'm gonna get started mixing the ingredients together. I'm going to start with the cinnamon streusel, which calls for combining all of the streusel ingredients into one bowl. My flour, light brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and melted butter all go into a medium bowl, and I'll mix to combine. I started out with a spatula, but halfway through realized that a fork would be a much better tool, so I made the swap. Once all of the ingredients look well combined, I will set this aside for the time being. Now I can move on to making the cake. In a medium bowl, I will combine the flour, baking powder, and cinnamon and give that a mix with the whisk. Once that is all evenly combined, I will set it aside for later. Separately, in a large bowl, I need to combine using either an electric hand mixer like I have or a stand mixer, the butter and sugar. Word of warning, the sugar kind of blows out everywhere when using the hand mixer. I wish I had given the butter and sugar a few turns with a spatula or a fork first, but I'll know better for next time. I will mix this until the butter and sugar are well combined and look light and fluffy. Once that looks good, I will add the eggs and vanilla and mix well, making sure to scrape down the sides of the bowl as needed. Now that the eggs and vanilla are well combined, I can add in the dry mixture that I made earlier. I'm choosing to add that dry mixture in batches just to make sure that everything gets well mixed. Once that looks good, then I can start to assemble the coffee cake. With my previously prepared pan, say that 5 times fast, I will pour half the coffee cake batter into the pan and spread it to cover the bottom. I had a little bit of trouble with this. This is a pretty sticky and thick batter, so be patient on this part and just try to shimmy that batter into the corners as best as you can. Once that is spread out, I'll sprinkle half the cinnamon streusel over the cake and then repeat with the rest of the batter and the rest of the streusel. Again, the batter is a little bit tricky, so be patient with yourself and just work slowly. Once all the batter and all the streusel is in the pan, I will bake the coffee cake for about 30 to 35 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. With 30 minutes ahead of me waiting for the cake to bake, I thought I would tidy up a bit. And that is when I discovered my grave mistake. Do you know what I did wrong? What I forgot? I forgot the sour cream. Even though I measured it out, had it ready to go, it was sitting right in front of my face, and I still forgot it. Dang it. Well, it's too late to add it now, so I'm gonna have to let the cake bake and hope that it won't be too bad. 30 to 35 minutes later, the coffee cake is out of the oven and now it needs to rest and cool in the pan. I've got it on the cutting board and I can't wait any longer, so I'm just gonna try a little bite here. For me personally, this is actually not too bad considering I forgot a major ingredient. I think there's a little too much streusel. And I'm not sure if it's because I'm not the biggest fan of that cinnamon sugar streusel topping, or if it's because I forgot the sour cream, so there's not anything to really balance that very sweet flavor. It's also a little dry, which I know is because I forgot the sour cream. So for all of these reasons, I'm going to commit to making this again tomorrow and try to do better and remember my ingredients. Good morning! It's a new day, different apron. I've got my coffee here and I'm ready to get started on this bake. Again, I'm going to speed right through the mise en place steps, making the streusel and then mixing the cake all the way up until I add the sour cream, since all of those steps are pretty much the same as what we went through yesterday. I will say, having the benefit of experience, I do have a few changes to my process and then to the assembly of the actual coffee cake that I would recommend. So I'm going to put the ingredients on different counters entirely as I go through the mise en place. While I don't think that having the mise en place bowls close together was the reason I missed an ingredient, I think separating the bowls will help keep my mind and my process organized a lot better. As I make the streusel and then the cake, I'm going to pull the mise en place bowls close to my mixing bowls so that I can keep an eye on them and you can keep an eye on them as well. I'm also going to adjust the amount of streusel that I use in my cake. While I don't love forgetting ingredients, making the recipe again allows me to adjust the original recipe to more of my personal preference. I know that tweaking ingredients and adjusting amounts is difficult, if not impossible, in baking, but I think little things like adjusting the amount of streusel that I use shouldn't impact the integrity of the recipe that much. While I continue working to get us caught up to where I messed up yesterday, let's talk about what I've learned. As y'all know, I am gaining confidence in the kitchen, which means there's a lot of growth, but there's also a few mishaps and learning opportunities. Even though I was prepared as much as I could be by measuring out my ingredients and having my recipe accessible, I still made a mistake. I was moving too fast and I forgot to take any additional steps to make sure that things weren't missed, and I forgot the sour cream, which was a big deal. All of that is to say, accidents happen. It's just baking. Luckily, this was a recipe that was just for myself and my family to enjoy, so the stakes were pretty low. In the future, I will try to remember to just slow down and enjoy the process. I will try to remember to do one last visual pass over my counter to make sure that I didn't miss anything before I move on to other steps, but especially before anything goes into the oven. Once that is all well combined, I will add the sour cream, which turns out is a pretty important ingredient. And that should take care of all the ingredients for the bake. No more bowls. After a few more turns with the mixer, I will take the bowl apart and scrape down the sides just to make sure that everything is mixed together. Then I'll get my prepared pan and, just like yesterday, add half the batter into the pan. I'll use the spatula to help coax the batter into the corners and then add some of the streusel. I will say, with the addition of the sour cream, the batter flows into the pan a lot easier and is way easier to manipulate. And just as a reminder, I thought the coffee cake I made yesterday was good, but there was too much streusel for my personal taste, so I'm not going to add the half of the streusel mixture like I did yesterday. I'm just going to add what I feel like looks like an appropriate amount. Finally, I'll add the rest of my batter and enough streusel where I feel like it looks good. This is just to suit my taste. If you like more streusel or you want to give it a try and then maybe dial it back later, feel free to do that as well. Then my pan will go into the 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for 30 to 35 minutes. After my 30 to 35 minutes is up and my coffee cake is out of the oven, I will leave it to cool in the pan for about 20 to 30 minutes. Yesterday, I only left it in there for about 10 minutes and didn't feel like that was long enough. Once that time has passed, I set my coffee cake, which still has that parchment paper lining, directly onto my cold countertop to help the coffee cake cool a little more and a little faster. Something I like about this recipe is the portions. This makes about 9 generous portions of coffee cake, which is the perfect amount if you have a smaller family like I do. So you can have some today and then a little bit tomorrow, but you're not left with leftovers for weeks and weeks and weeks. Once the coffee cake is cut and divided, let's take a look at today's versus yesterday's. Now you can see that yesterday's coffee cake is dense and darker in color than today. Today's looks much lighter in color and fluffy. It is missing that streusel line, but again, that was my choice to dial back the streusel, and I'm okay with that. All right, enough looking at it. Let's see if adding all the ingredients makes a big difference. And what do you know? It does. This coffee cake is wonderful. It's light and delicious and has a subtle cinnamon flavor to it, and is definitely more of what I was expecting from the bake. I will say though, even though we've talked about that streusel quite a bit today, I probably could have used more in the middle than when I added. This is good, don't get me wrong, but when I make it again, I will use a little bit more than I did this time, but not as much as I did last time. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, everybody, I'm off to go find a cup of coffee. Thank you so much for being with me today. I hope you'll share what you learned with me in the comments below. And remember, trying new things is messy, but the end results can be pretty sweet. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.